Hello, I'm Donna Murphy. And in May of 2006, I was thrilled because I began to feel my son move inside of me. It was a thrilling time. I was so excited about this pregnancy, and I was just thrilled to feel him inside of me so early. He was such an active child. Matter of fact, when we went to the ultrasound, he was moving around so much that the nurse had trouble keeping the ultrasound wand on him because he was just moving around so much inside of my womb. Then on Memorial Day, I was at a Memorial Day parade and I noticed my hands and feet were swelling. So I had some concerns, but I knew I had eaten some salty snacks and I wasn't the youngest pregnant person around. But I thought just to be careful the next day, I'll go into the doctor's office. So I went to the doctor's office. And when I went in there, the doctor's assistant couldn't find the heartbeat right away. But that didn't concern me because that happened the last time and they found the heartbeat and there was no problem. So she asked me to go in another room and the doctor did an ultrasound and he couldn't find a heartbeat. I was told my baby had just died. I was devastated. He had just died that day, and there was nothing I could do. My husband, being the good man, good father, good husband that he is, good provider, wanted to provide a casket for our son. So we directly from the ultrasound, we went to a funeral home to ask if they had a casket for our son, who was supposed to be about 8 inches long, as he was. And we went from funeral home to funeral home to funeral home to funeral home. And everyone said, there's no such thing. We don't have caskets for babies that size. All the doors were closed. We had no place to get a casket for our son. And we were devastated. There was nothing we could do. So in desperation, we picked up the phone and my husband called several funeral homes. And finally, one person said, you can go to the World Market and get yourself a box and place him in the box. And that was way better than the alternative, which is to leave him at the hospital and he might get placed in medical waste. We want to take care of our son. And so we went to the World Market. We found ourselves a box. It was about 1 foot long, but just wood inside, just plain. So I went home that night and I sewed some linens the best I could. I'm not a seamstress. So there would be something inside of that box. We went in next day to the hospital. I was induced, and the following day I delivered our son. And they were right. He was 8 inches long. And we placed him in that box 2 days later with no way to protect him. We went and got 2 boxes of press and seal, wrapped it around that box, and placed him in the ground on our grave sites. That was awful. We didn't protect our son like we wanted to. We didn't have a proper casket for him. We didn't have a proper burial for him. But that's what we needed to do. That was the best we could do at that time. It was the hardest time of our lives. We felt helpless and hopeless. The child that I was supposed to protect and care for died. I couldn't protect him inside of me, and I couldn't even give him a decent burial. That was devastating. Now, I know the death of a baby or child is one of the hardest things that funeral directors face. And funeral directors hate the situation. I can understand why. When we walked to these funeral homes, I was obviously pregnant. We had just left the ultrasound. I was in a state of shock. My husband would talk to the funeral director, and then in the middle of it, I would just walk out of the funeral home crying. The funeral director wants to deal with that. I know it's really hard on them. But miscarriage and stillbirth needs to be dealt with. Parents deserve some closure. Parents deserve to choose disposition of their child's remains. Parents deserve to have their grief acknowledged and to receive support. You may say, well, it's just a rare occasion. That doesn't happen that much. That's why we're not prepared. But it isn't rare. In the first trimester, 1 in 4 babies is miscarried. 1 in 4. And a fair amount of those children are found. It's not that they couldn't find anything. I mean, babies in the first trimester could be up to 3 inches long. In the second trimester, when that mom has that bump, but she's not huge yet, 1 in 33 babies die in that second trimester. And depending on what state you're in, sometimes that's a miscarriage and sometimes that's a stillbirth, because that varies according to state. But it's 1 in 33. And those parents need help. And in the third trimester, it's 1 in 160 babies are stillborn. 1 in 160 babies. So it's not that rare. There are 1 million miscarriages every year in this country. There are 24,000 babies who are stillborn every year in this country. We need to help these families. And according to the CDC, there's over 600,000 abortions every year in the United States. And with the reversal of Roe with the Dobbs decision, we can expect to have a significant increase in the number of miscarriages and stillbirths that funeral homes will need to deal with. So funeral directors need to offer options for dispositions like caskets and urns, and more than one option. These families were not able to protect their child while they were in the womb. They need to know that they can do something to protect their baby's body now when it's going to go into the ground or when it's going to be cremated. These parents had no choice in what happened to their child. They need some choices in caskets and urns. Do you know what businesses and ministries offer caskets and urns for babies of various gestations? If you don't, look it up on the internet. Look up miscarriage caskets. Look up stillborn caskets. Look up infant urns. Look up and give these families choices. You know, all 50 states have laws for stillborn babies, and there are rules in place. But there are less than 20 states that give parents the right to choose disposition of their miscarried babies' remains. Most states have no laws regarding babies less than 20 weeks. And of course, miscarriage and stillbirth vary according to state. But a miscarried baby can be 10 to 12 inches long, depending on your state. The baby can be that long. And there's no laws in most of the states protecting the parents' rights to disposition of their child remains. And there's no laws against it either. There's just no laws. So do you know the laws in your state? If not, be aware of those laws for stillborn and miscarried babies. Many people think that pregnancy loss is not significant, but pregnancy loss can cause a significant trauma to those parents. We did a survey of 512 women who lost a baby at 10 weeks or more, and there was trauma. 40% of them said they had a physical ache in their arms. They needed to hold something in their arms. So as many were found that they held a bag of flour or their child's baby doll because they literally had an ache in their arms. It's a syndrome called empty arm syndrome. 41% worry about their living children all the time. And although normally you might want somebody to leave their children at home, these parents are scared to death that something's going to happen to their other children because they didn't have any ability to protect this child. How are they going to protect them? So they might want to bring their babies in, their children in, so that they can watch them when they talk to you as a funeral director. So they have this fear of losing their living children. 48% of parents have flashbacks, memories of when they found out their baby didn't have a heartbeat, memories of when their baby died, memories of the baby being born, or what the baby looked like, or the experience that they had at the hospital. So they have these flashbacks and they have nightmares that cause problems. There's changes in relationships. As you know, that can be really hard on a marriage, but sometimes families actually become closer together because of it. 54% of mothers say they had intrusive, upsetting memories of the birth and increased irritability and outburst of anger. Many mothers say they have difficulty concentrating. So be patient with these parents. Repeat. Take the time to repeat what you're telling them because it's not all going to sink in. Many of them have difficulty falling or staying asleep, which probably adds to the difficulty concentrating. 70% say they have a loss of interest in activities or life in general. And many, of course, when they're coming to you, are in the state of shock. 73% feel uneasy around pregnant people. 75% feel like life is divided into two categories. Like, this was my life before, and since I've lost this baby, this is my life now. 77% feel detached from others. And it's no wonder with how pregnancy loss is treated in our society. You know, when grandma dies, you usually gather around a table and talk about who's going to do a reading, who's going to do offertory, who's going to be a pallbearer, who's going to do all these different things. There's a lot of love from people around you. There's a lot of discussion of grandma's life. And at the funeral, there are people that come who love grandma. There are people who come who love you. And there's a feeling of love all around. But when you lose a baby, it's just usually you and your husband. And if you're even allowed a church ceremony, maybe not many people are there. So let's try to normalize it more. Let's try and make sure that if the parents want some type of church ceremony, that they be able to have something like that. That is part of the healing process. And 78% of parents fear losing a future child. So even though this is just happening now, they're also thinking about the future and the fears they have in the future. When I was in the hospital delivering our son, I had 3 different nurses. One specific nurse was so kind, so loving, and her name is Kathleen. And I still remember that to this day. I actually don't remember what she looks like, but I remember how she made me feel. And I remember her name was Kathleen. There were 2 other nurses who cared for me. They weren't as loving as Kathleen. They weren't as compassionate as her. They weren't as gentle as her. They weren't as caring as her. And I don't remember their names. I remember the nurse, Kathleen. I remember the kind nurse. I remember her, and I would recommend her as a nurse to anyone. Be the kind funeral home that they would recommend to anyone. You can make a difference for families experiencing the loss of a baby. So choose. You can add to their sorrow and be a part of the problem. You can send them away. You can not give them choices in caskets or choices in urns. You cannot be compassionate. You cannot make a lovely area for them to have a layout. Or you can be part of the healing. You can be compassionate. You can be prepared with choices for caskets and urns, not just one casket you can have, not just one urn you can have, but different choices. You can have a rocker that a mom can sit in and hold her baby if she has a layout. You can tell them where they can get specialized support, because people with pregnancy loss cannot get the same support as those who have lost a grandma or grandpa. It's not the same. You don't have a lot of memories to share. And so it's a different kind of loss. So they should be in a support group or get specialized support by those who understand pregnancy loss, who understand what it's like. They did not lose just, the family did not lose. The family did lose their hopes and dreams, but they also lost a child. They truly lost a child that can never be replaced. So you want to be remembered as the caring funeral home who went out of their way and served these families. These grieving families will be the next ones choosing a funeral home for their parents. Yes, it's a good idea for the future and to get future clients, but it's the right thing to do, serving them properly. So go and be the funeral director that they need you to be. Thank you.